We are Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14, presented by Stakes. We are previewing every single SEC basketball team for the coming season. Today we get to the Florida Gators, who, Blake, had an interesting year. We're just about in the NCAA tournament, blew it in the SEC tournament, changed coaches, and here the Gators reset with Todd Golden and one of the better players in the league who returns in Colin Castleton, and hopefully he'll stay healthier than he did a year ago, because that could be disastrous for the Gators if he gets hurt again.
Boy, just starting off on the pessimistic side, Chris. For the
I'm not
Gators.
necessarily pessimistic, but I am a realist, because if Colin Castleton goes down,
I
I think
mean,
this
I
team's in
think
trouble.
we could say that about a
Yeah.
lot of teams, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I think having the off season surgery seemed like he's good to go. And I think now that he gets beyond that shoulder issue, it's like how much better can he be? Can he be even better than he has been? Because as you know, I was someone that was slow to get on the Colin Castleton train, but eventually I got there, and now I'm there. And I mean, I think you look at it, if you're Todd Golden, you're taking a job, and you get to start with him as your, the foundation of what you want to do. That's a great place to start. Talking about a 6'11", 240-pound senior that has proven, he has what it takes to do what he can do in the SEC. And as I've told you, I mean, we'll see in our SEC individual player rankings that we'll put together. To me, he's the biggest threat to Oscar Tshiebwe, perhaps, in winning SEC Player of the Year. But of course, a lot of that could be dependent on what Florida does as a team, because fair unfair, that factors into those kind of things. But yeah, I mean, having Castleton, the golden era begins. Can he take some of those things that worked at San Francisco, be able to translate them, returning to SEC country? Obviously, as a former Bruce Pearl assistant, yeah, I think it's an interesting new start for the program, and we'll see if they can get back to where they want to be as a regular Final Four type contender.
What did you make of that hire? He doesn't have a lot of experience. He was 3 years at San Francisco. Last year went 24-10, made the NCAA tournament in the West Coast Conference. They didn't have a lot of marquee wins, but the computers loved that team all year. Went 22-12 his first year, and then the in-between COVID year, which was just really screw for everybody, went 11-14. That's not a lot of experience to get a job like this. What did you make of that hire?
I mean, I think it's the era that we're in.
Yeah.
I mean, really, if you think about it, like it's how many, I mean, yes, are you taking a chance on a guy that doesn't have as much experience as other guys that have been hired in the league? Absolutely. But at the same time, you are talking about a guy that, you know, I think has the upside that you want if you're talking about getting your program to back to that top level. Because as we said, he is a former Bruce Pearl assistant, someone who's, worked under Pearl, understands kind of the things that you need to do to be successful. Played at St. Mary's. Randy Bennett's there, another guy who's had a lot of success. Was at Columbia, San Francisco with Kyle Smith, who went to Washington State. And, I mean, let's face it too. Like, this is a guy who we talk about kind of the changing landscape in college basketball. This is a guy who has fully embraced, the analytical side of things and that type of stuff. And so I think that, you see him in the same mold as kind of these other top rising coaches, right? Whether it's you know, a Matt McMahon, a Dennis Gates, or whoever else you want to throw in there. Like, these are kind of that group of coaches that have had success recently that feel like that next wave of, future top coaches. And I think that, Florida's not going to go out and just hire, just anyone. I think that, given, I mean, it's funny to think, right? Because Golden and McMahon played each other last year in the NCAA tournament, Murray State and San Francisco. And I think we kind of knew at that point that both guys were going to find their way into the SEC or another power conference somewhere. And I think it just, are you taking I'll say this, are you taking a risk? Sure you are, but I think any hire is a risk at this point outside of a select group, of guys that have been coaching for a long time. And so he's only 37. Yeah, doesn't have the experience of maybe other teams or other coaches in the league. But at the same time, I think for Florida, they feel like this is a guy that can kind of get back to doing the kind of things that they did under Billy Donovan. I'm not saying he's going to be Billy Donovan, but can kind of get back to pushing things in the direction they need to push them to become an SEC threat every single season.
Well, we usually start these previews with discussing backcourts, and we'll do the same here. Florida brings in Kyle Lofton, who almost literally never came off the floor at St. Bonaventure, averaged 12.8, 3.6 boards, 5.9 assists, 2.3 assist to turnover ratio. Didn't shoot it incredibly well, 40% from the field, 28% from three. Did shoot it 82% from the line. They've got Myreon Jones, who didn't shoot it well at all, 36% from the floor, 32% from three, did shoot 74% from the line. Had a disappointing season after transferring from Penn State. Did average 8.5 points a game, but there have been times that Myreon Jones had big nights and kind of carried them. So I think Myreon Jones is a better player than the stats were a year ago. You've got Will Richard from Belmont, who we saw here locally. Had a great season as a freshman for Casey Alexander's team near us. Averaged 12 points, 6 boards a game, 47% from the field, 80 from the line, 33% from three. Trey Bonham from VMI, another smallish guard, averaged 13.5, 4.5 rebounds, and almost 2 assists per turnover. Bonham shot it a little better, 48% from the field. Did shoot it well from the line, 83%. Looks like a pretty decent foul shooting team here for the Gators. So you got a lot of options there in the backcourt, Blake.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is you'll see Lofton and Bonham kind of play off of each other from the start. That feels like probably the best bet, I would guess, um, because I think Jones is a wild card, right? I mean, you could
Yes,
say that
very much.
by default, maybe you think he's just gonna, and he may start. I'm not saying he won't, because again, at starter, I mean, at this point, like it's like we're in November, like it's November, like this is gonna change as the season goes along. But I think Jones is the wild card because he is the guy that the upside is there, but I think it's just a matter of, just can you get the most out of him from an efficient standpoint? And as we said, I mean, that's something you got to remember. Todd Golden is an analytics guy. Like he's going to be looking at this advanced data and all this kind of stuff. And, when you just look at the numbers on Jones, I think there's a lot that you want to see get better. And it's going to have to, I think, for him to be, a big part of their success because it was just a little bit too up and down last season, and that efficiency just was not there. So I think he's the wild card of the group. But if he can be what you think he can be, he'll play a lot of minutes. But I do think Lofton. I mean, look at the numbers, right? I mean, it's just a guy who was all A10, I think 3 times, started over 100 games. Just played a ridiculous amount of minutes, which, as we talked about with like Welch, right? It's like if you were a starter for St. Bonaventure, you were probably in the top
He
whatever in
played
terms of
a
minutes
lot.
played. Like it's just you weren't coming off the floor. So I think there's value in that because that was a St. Bonaventure team that had some success, and I think that I feel like Lofton's probably aside from Castleton, I feel like Lofton's the driving force here for this team, and I think that's where you pair him with a Bonham in the backcourt initially, and you kind of see what you can do there because Bonham, someone else, start a lot of games, he can score. So I think that's probably what your backcourt situation looks like for Florida at the start. Now you talked about Richard and coming from Belmont, and another guy I think that got valuable experience as a freshman and will now be able to step in and see how that translates. Going from Belmont to Florida. I think that's going to be, an important part here too, because I think he'll have to play a role, right? I mean, I think that's without question. I think he's going to have to play a role on this team and be able to help them, to give them some of that depth. So I think that's something to kind of consider there. So, um, I mean, I think we always say there's pieces to work with. I think there's clearly pieces to work with in the backcourt. With adding Richard, if you look at the potential, I think it's obviously there. At the guard position, and I think with Bonham coming in at the point, Lofton's ability to certainly someone who's played a lot of minutes. I think there's a lot to be optimistic about in terms of the backcourt here for the Gators.
touching on Jones again, he's had a weird career. First of all, this will be his 5th year to play. He averaged 2 years ago 13.3 a game. Excuse me, that was 2019-20. 2021, he averaged 15.3. Shooting percentages, though, have gone down 3 straight years. He went from 44% to 39 to 36 last year. 3-point percentages have gone down 40, 40, 32. I guess if you want to be an optimist, and I can be optimistic about Myreon Jones. I've seen him play well. But I think you would have to say last year seems like the outlier. I think there's a better player in there than the Gators got a year ago. And if he is, I think this is probably a tournament team.
Yeah, no, if he is, I mean, hey, they'll be in good shape because I think that you kind of know what you're getting out of Bonham. I know he's training up from BMI, but I still think he'll be fine. Lofton, as we said, I think you kind of know what you're getting there. Richard, I think is going to be interesting to see, what he can do, adding to the mix. So yeah, I think it's as I said, like he's the wild card. Jones the wild card to me. Depending on how things unfold, I think I don't want to say he's the biggest question, but like he can also be the biggest answer depending on if he can just be more efficient. I think that's the thing, and just add more consistent production at that guard position.
Well, here's where my questions are. It's the rest of the returnees. You got Reeves, Lane, Fudge, who transferred. Actually, Fudge is not a returnee. He transferred from LSU. Felder and Jatoba are just guys at this point. And you need guys. You need several guys to round out teams, to be depth, to be glue guys. But I think that's where I have the biggest questions about Florida.
Yeah, because anytime you have a new coaching staff, I think there's always going to be the questions about the guys coming back, especially the guys who didn't necessarily pop on paper in terms of watching, looking at the stats, watching them play, and I think there's a lot to be determined there. I like Reeves. I think he's got a lot of potential. As someone who comes in and I think he had a better finish to the season last year once he got acclimated to things. I think he'll start right away. I think that, I just think what he brings to the table, I feel like he'll have to be on the floor a lot. And I don't know. There's just something about his game. I really like it, and I see the potential there. It's just again a new coaching staff. How does he fit into what they want to do? But I think he's got enough versatility to be able to play him, on the wing. He's just kind of that. What is he? He's 6'6", just kind of a very athletic guy. And I think he could, become a favorite perhaps for this new coaching staff, depending on how his game develops. The other guys, Felder, we've seen like he can be a solid scorer. He's got a, huge wingspan. I think they'll probably need him from a size standpoint. So I think I'm curious to see what role he plays right away, because I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting a lot of good minutes as a defender too. So I think that Felder's in the mix. The other two, I think, are the bigger questions to me in terms of Lane. I think he's a good. We always look at Chris Dortch's Blue Ribbon College Basketball Yearbook, and one of the interesting things Todd Golden pointed out in the story they did on Florida was that they kind of looked at it from an analytical standpoint, and Florida was a top 5 defensive team whenever Lane was on the floor. And so I think that's something that has certainly caught their eye as a staff. And so maybe that's something that they think about here. Being able to use him as a defender, that will be important. Although I think, Chris, that's where the minutes, perhaps become hard to come by, for him.
Yeah.
And I don't know, because there are some guys in front of him I feel like probably, but again, if he comes out and he's a standout defender, other guys aren't playing defense, then he'll get his minutes. Jatobo is one that, you can't ignore the size. 6'11", 300 pounds. Had an injury last year that I think kind of impacted his season a bit. But that was something else in the Blue Ribbon story. Could you just think of that possibility of? I think that was something else Golden mentioned in the story. One of the quotes was about, he was kind of interested in maybe we play Castleton and Justobo together. My goodness, that's
cool.
That's a group right there. If you can put 2 6'11" guys on there that are 240 or higher, poundage wise. So I don't know. I don't know how often we see that, but that at least has my interest in thinking about that possibility. I don't know. I just can't see it, but maybe you can. Maybe that is something that will be an idea you can work with. So I think there's at least, there's skill there on the returning guys. I just my guess is that Reeves will play a bit. I think Felder, he's older. Defending, I think he'll play a bit too. It's just, as we always say, with a new coaching staff, it's hard to project minutes, because I think until you see these guys out there on the floor against someone that's other than the people that you're practicing against every day, it can be hard to kind of gauge what their role is going to be.
Well, if they do that, where Florida really got killed last year was on the offensive glass, or the defensive glass, as Florida's playing it. 333 in defensive rebounding rate. So I don't know if playing Jatoba and Castleton at the same time helps that. Florida was really good in block rate a year ago, 23rd in the country at Ken Palm, and steal rate too, top 20 at 18. So there were some things there to like about them defensively. The weird thing was, with all that, they were 77 nationally in defensive rating. And again, I think a lot of that goes back to being just mediocre at forcing turnovers.
Oreo is excited about that defense.
He is going off about something. We must have dogs walking down our street.
Oh boy.
Oh, we got off easy that time. He's done, I guess. And offensive rebounding percentage again. Man, he's got me off track here. Anyway, wherever I was going with that.
Wherever you were going. How about this? If you want to donate to the channel, you can leave a super chat to help us get out of our office bedrooms here and get into a studio. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things you look at. I feel like, for Florida, it's one of those things where, like, I think the frustration we've had with Florida, maybe towards the end of the Mike White era there, Chris, has been the frustration on offense. And like they could just be a really frustrating offensive team sometimes. And I think you look at the defensive aspect of it. That was kind of something we talked about too. When you looked at kind of the trends of the Mike White era, it was like that fall off really started when they were not as consistent defensively too. And when you combine those two things together, a team that can be frustrating at times offensively, even if you look at some of their advanced numbers, they weren't bad, but I think they were still some things you looked at and just felt like maybe there was a little more there offensively than they got. Statistically, they're a hard team to figure out, because of it is a new coaching staff too, like we said. And I think Golden's going to bring some things. If you want to look back at San Francisco, what were some of the common themes that, they had, if you're looking at it from Ken Palm and all that. I mean, they were a team that defended great on the perimeter last year. I think they were top 10 in the country in 3-point field goal defense. Pretty efficient on both sides of the court for the most part. And, but again, this is the SEC, and I think it's just going to be a different, thing to look at. And so I think that, and I'm saying this, but like statistically, they're so interesting just because I think there is such a huge analytics focus for Todd Golden and his staff. And so I think it's going to be kind of, fun to watch and see how they use some of that in terms of figuring out, the best buttons to push and some of those statistical things that maybe they saw from the previous era that they really hone in on here with this group they have now.
Okay, let's tie up some loose ends on the Gators. Before we do that, a shout out to our partners at Stakes. That is STAKES. Big games coming up in SEC football this week. We will be making some predictions about those in the Stakes app. We want to see if you guys agree or disagree with our takes. So go to playwithstakes.com/14. Sign up for Stakes. Place your predictions, whether you like our takes or you don't like them. If you use the invite code Southeastern14 when you sign up, you'll get a double welcome bonus. Stakes is a predictions app, not a betting app. It's free to play, free to join, free to brag when you beat us in our picks, and you can win NFTs. So what's not to like? You can have fun. You can support our biggest sponsor. You can win stuff over at Stakes. Okay, I don't think we talked about Riley Kugel, who's one of the better recruits they've had in a while. He's top 100, which doesn't always move the needle in this league anymore as well as it recruits. So that may be a topic we want to hit, and maybe anything else we didn't get to on the Gators as we wrap up here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that here's the deal with the Gators. It's what does the rotation look like? But it all goes back to the top. And like I said, I realize, Todd Golden is someone that is seen as kind of that next big thing, right? I said that earlier. Like he is that guy that you go out and get if you see all that potential in the world that's there and you make that hire because again, someone was going to hire him after especially, what he was able to do at last year at San Francisco. And you can kind of see that he was geared up to make that move. But I think there's still a lot of unknowns in terms of how are they going to play? How are they going to continue to build their roster year in and year out? Like, what does the roster look like? How do these guys he's brought in this year? How do they pan out? I mean, I think there's, like I said, I have confidence in the Loftons and the Bottoms and those guys. I think they're going to be okay. But it is a matter of seeing stylistically how big is that difference that we've seen in recent years, and I think it's going to be kind of, you know, the adjustment to the SEC. I think we always say, right? It's hard just to come in and win right away, no matter what your roster looks like. And there will obviously probably be some ups and downs at times. So let's see what that looks like once they get on the court. And I think that this can be a good team. Do I think this team has the upside of the top teams in the SEC that we would probably rank ahead of them right now? When you have Castleton, I think anything's possible because you do have a top, like I said, a player of the year type candidate that, quite frankly, Chris probably would be the SEC player of the year right now in the preseason if had Oscar Tshiebwe not returned. So I think all those things that you consider, right? I think there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic, but I also understand if some people want to say, let me take the wait and see approach because it is a new coach. I think there is a largely unproven supporting cast that you want to see more out of. And I'm not saying that's everybody, but I think there are some of those guys, like we said, a Jones. I'm really high on Reeves. I think he takes a big jump. But some of the other transfers, I think you want to see, how a Fudge or Richard, even a, like you said, a freshman. How do all these guys fit into what they want to do as a staff? And I think that's the thing I'm most interested in. Beyond that, I think Florida can be an NCAA tournament team. For me, they're that team I kind of put in that same category as an LSU. New coach, a lot of good pieces. Just how does everything kind of come together? So I think you're muted. The Oreo mute is on.
Yes, the Oreo mute is definitely on. He is still going on in the background intermittently. So excuse that, please, if it pops up again. All right, the Gators have got Florida State in what's kind of been an interesting series. That's on the road November the 18th. The next week, Xavier, neutral site game. Connecticut at home December 7th. Oklahoma, neutral site game on December the 20th. So Florida will certainly be tested in its out-of-conference schedule.
Yes, they will. And I'm going to run through this quickly because the Barry mute's about to be on because I hear someone pulling up to the house. Yes, a non-conference schedule. They'll have some spots that I think will help them get acclimated to an interesting start to the SEC schedule. They got to go to Auburn in game one and they host A&M. I think kind of the middle of their SEC schedule, actually the back part of it looks a little bit tougher on paper maybe than the front half. So that's something else that may help, this team kind of figure out who are the guys they can count on, which we know there's a couple of those guys right off the bat, but who are those other guys that can step up? I think the schedule will put them in a position to do that.
Okay, we are previewing or have previewed every single SEC team for the coming basketball season. We'll have power rankings coming soon, player rankings coming soon, and of course, a ton of football stuff. We do this. You may catch it a long time after we do it, but this is the week of Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, Alabama. We will do deep dives on those games. If you like your SEC football, basketball, and baseball, this is a channel you'll love. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our content. Thanks for watching Southeastern 14 presented by Steaks. We'll see you again soon.